Hey guys, it's Totally Local podcast. Oh, can they hear me? Can they see me? Am I doing this now? All right. What's up, guys? Totally Local podcast. Colorful characters, local businesses, and entrepreneurs in and around the Jersey Shore area. Today, we've got a colorful character and an entrepreneur. We got Scotty Elpaw with us today. He's promoting, thank you, yes. Promoting his new book, Have No Fear. There's always fucking next year, a COVID tale. It's been described as, it's like an adult kids book. Was that?
Adult kids book. You nailed it there as well. Yeah.
Perfect. Kind of just talking about, what I think maybe you've gone through, but we've all gone through, through all this mess that we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming on here today.
Great to be with you.
Cool. Good. Good. I'm glad we got to link up. From what I've seen, you've lived a very colorful life. I want to, first start off by saying thank you for your service.
I appreciate that.
You were in the military. You were in Iraq for 3. You were in the military. You were in the Army for 3 years, and you were stationed in Iraq.
Yes,
Baghdad.
I was. I started out in Savannah, Georgia, so I was part of the 3rd Infantry Division, and then deployed to Iraq in 2005 and got hurt while I was there, and later 2005, and subsequently got out of the military.
That's incredible. I mean, I have family members that are in the military, and I always feel strange about, like, I want to say that to people. I want to, like, walk up to them and be like, thank you for your service, but I'm like, do people in the military appreciate that? Do they want to hear it, or they just think I'm like some
No,
doofus?
I think people broadly appreciate it who are in the military.
Yeah.
I think there are people who dig in a little bit too deep into asking people about their service. I personally am an open book, but I think every veteran deals with that in a different way.
Yeah, I would never want to, like, I'm the friends that I've had and the people I've talked to about it. Even with that, I wouldn't dig too deep, because you could get a sense of there's a reverence there, and there's a certain a weight to the responsibility that you faced, and I just want to say thank you, because that's very brave, basically, and I understand that, like, as far as a country goes, you're putting yourself out there in ways that like I obviously haven't, and I just thank you for your service, basically.
I appreciate it.
Now, you lived you've had some interesting things, let's just say, happen in life that you've dealt with. And from what I can ascertain, you have maintained a very positive outlook on life. And, I can't even imagine. I mean, just to do a basic rundown, it's, you served in the Army.
Yep.
You went to West Point?
I went to West Point, served in the Army after that.
You've gone through a divorce and a new marriage.
Yep.
And you're a cancer survivor.
I am.
So that's like, any one of those things is like, difficult, to say the least, to deal with.
Yeah, it's definitely served up some life experiences, and I'm kind of older than my years may dictate because of those things.
That's, and just from our brief conversation that we've had before the show started, it's you could just tell that you're, you seem to love life.
I do. I do. I think, and I think that's kind of why I wrote the book, is I think people should, evaluate their view of life and really be thoughtful about how they're engaging life, especially in a difficult time that we all are facing. And this is the first real challenge that I've faced that everyone in the world has faced alongside each other. I think it's a first of our lifetime, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's affected everyone, not only in our country, not only in, our small area, but it's like globally affected everyone in waves, in different times, and it's, and obviously different ways. You were up in the city, you were working up in the city. This all hit, and you obviously, like many people, had the ability to work from home.
Yeah.
And did the idea from the book stem from that? Do you have a background in, like, writing? Do you
So absolutely not in that case. And most people who know me would tell you that I'm a terrible writer. I even have difficulty putting emails together. So, and I think my wife was probably most surprised in this, as she's an English major, but I don't have experience in writing, but I kind of put it together based on my experience of what happened when the pandemic started, I was working in the city, commuting an hour and a half each way because I live here in Monmouth County. And then all of a sudden, all of that stopped. And although the world was in a terrible place, and look, I make no bones about this, like horrible global pandemic, terrible political environment, horrible racial injustice out there. But the way that this affected me, I tried to capture the positivity in it, which was I stopped working in the city, stopped commuting 3 hours each, 3 hours total a day, and started working from home and being more present with my family and had a totally different experience.
I can't, I never had to commute into the city, but that's like, what is that, like an hour and a half?
It's an hour and a half each way. So I would take the bus from PNC and then, drive to PNC, take the bus, and then walk from Port Authority to work.
So what, that's a lot of, that's like, that's over like a few hours of just commute time.
Yeah, it's like 15 hours a week.
So, Jesus. So you don't have to do that anymore. That's just one of the things that happened. Now at home, how many, you have 3 or 4 kids?
3 kids.
So you have 3 kids at home. They are, they're there obviously all day,
all the time. Now
you're
I'm there all the time, and they're all the time.
And your wife, she took some time away from work before it all hit.
Yep.
Because she wanted to spend more time with the kids.
She wanted to spend more time with the kids.
She got it
in the frame of reference. Not exactly how she ended up, but she wanted to spend more time with the kids and have them in school. But instead, she got to be, kind of a school mom, and both of us as teachers at home alongside the Zoom.
What's that even like? Like having to. I always had a problem. I always had a problem in school. I was a bit of a troublemaker. Let's just say that. And I didn't really, enjoy it. Until I got to college, I didn't really enjoy school. I didn't connect with any of the teachers or anything like that. And, in my experience, like now, depending on how they look at it, it's kind of like you're the bad guy, where it's like you're teaching them stuff. Is it difficult to motivate them to want to learn these concepts?
I think at first it was tough because virtual learning was like unexplored mostly. So adjusting to that, getting the technology to work, just like working from home, having Zoom, back out on you and technology issues, that was tough, but it's even more tough to motivate your kids. Yeah. Because you're as a parent, you are the least likely for them to listen to. So to have to teach them something, other than just general life skills, to actually get them to read and to understand math and things like that. It was a difficult adjustment, especially for me, because I was commuting so much and in the city so much. I was spending a lot more time with my kids.
Is it, and there's all this like new math, and it's not like just 4 plus 4.
And I write about that in the book, like the new math. My wife isn't that good at math. I am very good at math, and the new math is like incredibly difficult to understand.
Is it incredibly difficult, and it's a good thing? Is it like preparing kids for doing things in the future that we're not going to do?
I mean, with the invention of calculators and all the things we have on our computer today, I don't know how much more they need to be able to do that you can't like get your hands on.
Yeah.
But I don't understand all of the reasons that it's there. I'm sure there are plenty of good reasons, but I try to teach my kids both the easy way that I learned and the new method so that they kind of can make their own determination. Now, my little guys are young, so my daughter's 13 and my boys are 6 and 4, so it's a little bit different. But
did you ever have this? Now I'm running into with my kid now is he's fixated on a song. He's fixated on the Wheels on the Bus, and he listens to it like over and over. And me and my wife had to be like, "Oh, sorry, it's the speaker is broken. We can't listen to it now." Like, do you have any advice for somebody that has just one kid that just like, how do you would you just like,
listen, enjoy it now because those songs change and it will get better with time. Ours was this song Taxi, and I still think about it. My wife and I talk about it every once in a while, how annoying it was, but we missed that our kids listen to that. Now my boys, like to listen to, and my daughter loved Madonna growing up.
Wow.
That made for some hysterical conversations, especially when she was singing Madonna songs from the 80s.
Yeah, like Papa Don't Preach and stuff. That's trouble. trouble.
That's exactly right. And then my boys now like the Beastie Boys and Gangnam Style, which I wish wasn't a thing.
Yes.
But again, that will come back, and some of the videos they've made off the back of that is pretty incredible.
Oh man, that's great. So I could just see by your response to that you definitely have this perspective on things that don't, that don't lend itself to, say, negativity. You seem to, even in just that instance, you just kind of flipped it and showed the positive in that situation.
Yeah, I think people, especially today, spend too much time on the negative. And there's a lot to be, and again, there's a lot to kind of ponder that's pretty negative out there. But a lot of the negative things that happen in our life are completely uncontrollable. I mean, you really, if you wind up focusing on that, it just turns into a perpetual cycle of negativity.
Yeah.
And I think if you kind of value what's happening and pivot into something different, into some positive feedback, right? Like, this is a horrible pandemic, but I'm spending more time with my kids. I'm not saying this isn't shitty, because it is. And I recognize that fully. I'm just saying I'm not going to spend my time wallowing in how shitty it actually is. I want to spend my time focused on how positive things are coming out of it. And that's me teaching my kid to ride his bike, me spending more time with my wife, spending more time with my kids, and kind of getting something that I never would have got.
Is it do you spend, obviously you're promoting a book, you want to get it out there and stuff, but as far as like spending any time with social media, do you find yourself, especially along this last year, just kind of dealing less with that? Because of, it used to be like, you'd comment on stuff or share a picture and like and then it turned into this weird, like, divisive kind of, how do you recommend people handle that, or how do you handle it yourself when you see that stuff online?
Yeah, that's tough, because the world, I'm a bit of a novice in the social media space. Like, I wasn't big on it before. I would use it to connect with people from my past. And now when you promote something, you have to actively post things and be thoughtful about what you're saying. And again, we're living in a world where it's divisive, and so people can interpret anything you're saying as totally the opposite of what you've put out there. So it's tough for me to integrate in that world. And as you mentioned, I think the world of social media has changed drastically. It used to be a connection place, and I think a lot of good has come from it, but a lot of negativity is breeding now when you think about the social dilemma, when you think about the way that people are being pushed into different things, and how they're self-perpetuating their news cycle. You're seeing it break up families and friends, and just because of a political opinion. And in the past, people wouldn't even share those kinds of things.
Yeah, I was definitely guilty of responding to people, troll-like behavior, especially in my early days. When you see those things pop up in Facebook of like a memory, and I'd be like, oh, why did I say that? It's so ridiculous.
Yeah.
Nothing like hateful, but it's just like, why be a wise ass? Why comment on things that are just not, I could think of one particular thing. This was from a couple of years ago, where somebody posted something about, if your relatives don't believe in XYZ, then you just got to disown them and not talk to them. I'm like, but what about my 90-year-old grandmother? Like, her too? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, that's crazy to me. Like, they grew up in a different time, and I'm not excusing anything that they say or do, but family is way more important than anything I read on social media.
All the noise that's going on right now. I think people are becoming they're trying to become so black or white in the decisions that they're making. This is right and this is wrong, and everybody has a different view, and there is gray area, and times were different and times are changing. And I would say, broadly, we live in a fantastic country that offers a lot of freedoms to a lot of different people. And I think people lose sight of that. And I think it's so important that people are able to express themselves. But as you start expressing yourself more, you put yourself out there. And again, it allows people to troll you. It allows people to voice their opinion back. And I think a lot of that is challenging, especially for younger kids who can be, bullied outside of school now virtually. And for individuals whose family views have changed, or they change who they are. Most of us are developing and growing over time. And as time changes, our reactions to things change and become more appropriate for our age and the time that we're living in. So I think that people are making these decisions in a vacuum, like this is that and this is that. And they should be a little bit more thoughtful about that. And what, you're really going to, divorce your 90-year-old grandmother out of the family.
Yeah.
Like she's going to get excommunicated.
Yeah, exactly. Like, sorry guys, I can't
Because
go to
of
Thanksgiving.
social media she doesn't even know may exist.
Yeah. I mean, it gets kind of. And the other thing too is like hypotheticals. I don't deal in hypotheticals, especially. Well, I don't respond to things on social media. I try not to. Let's just say that. My intention is to just kind of ignore it if I have nothing positive to say. But like what irritates me too are these hypotheticals that people pose where I'm just like, I deal in the real. Like if you were in a situation, you're gonna really know how you would handle it.
Yeah.
But these hypotheticals that people pose, it's just like that A, these things aren't happening the way you're saying they're happening, and B, it's like, you know, it's not really, you got to deal with your life. Like, where are you sitting? Are you breathing? Are you healthy? Does anyone need help? Like, those are the kind of things that people need to like.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think people spend more time thinking about how they're going to react to a Facebook post or how they're taking a picture in a certain filter than they do actually enjoying life. You know, I think about my commuting. And there's an example that I've given in some of the discussions that I've had, which is like when you commute in the city, you know, you take a bus somewhere and then you walk from one place to the other. And most people are just either listening to something or on their phone looking down or looking down at their feet, trying to get where they're going as fast as possible. And they have to-go cup in their hands and things like that. From my perspective, you know, I realized that I was doing that. And what you fail to realize is that all the people around you are visiting New York City, which is one of the greatest cities on the face of the earth, and they're looking up and they're admiring everything. And you're too busy to soak that in, and you're not present enough to soak that in. You're just trying to get from one place to the next. And I think people would do better if they tried to soak some of that in.
Yeah, just take those moments. It's like, as you were saying that, it reminded me of being at a concert. And you're, you know, I'll put my phone away. I won't really, you know, I might take a picture in the beginning or take one picture, you know, somewhere in the middle or something. But like you're at a concert and then everybody's phones go up.
Every single person's phone's up.
And they think it's you know, having a video background and understanding, like you're not, first of all, the sound's going to be blown out. And you're not like, you know, you're not going to shoot it like, you know, you're not Scorsese right now. You're not going to, you know, take a perfect picture.
No.
So you might as well just kind of be kind of more in the moment than doing that. The one thing that I'm just like, I have to just take a deep breath or, you know, go to a different area of the venue just to kind of get away from it if you can, because it's so pervasive. It's so, you know, everybody just kind of naturally does that. But kind of more to what you were saying, it's, you know, every day going into the city, being in the city, or just kind of even around here, even beautiful Monmouth and Ocean County, which I love, obviously, because of the podcast. Like there's so much to just go out and just be a part of.
There's so much to explore, and I think it's so much more interesting than what's happening on your phone. And a lot of what's happening on your phone or on social media, you know, is fraudulent in nature, or it's just somebody's opinion.
Yeah, it's skewed in some way.
Yeah.
You know, it's really hard to find any. And once you start going down those rabbit holes, which, you know, I was talking about earlier, I think before we went on, is just, you know, when everything hit, then you're like, oh God. I can't say that I handled it exactly how you did, which sounds like you were very, very positive, and you have obviously more of a broader perspective on you know, the highs and lows or how to handle a situation. So when I was first, you know, dealing with all of this, you know, when everyone was like wrapping themselves in cellophane and wearing like goggles and going to the store to get as much toilet paper as possible so they could, you know, be a mummy for Halloween. I don't know what they were doing with all the toilet paper. My mother-in-law bought us a bunch of toilet paper, which I appreciate because we still have, like, we're down to like the last 5 rolls. So, you know, I was happy with
I think
that.
everybody has their stockpile.
Yeah, like it's we were good every day. I'd walk. I'd be like, oh, we're still good. All right,
Yeah.
good. I don't have to go get it. That's when I knew we were doing better. Was when I saw this toilet paper come back to
That's
the stores.
exactly right.
But, you know, when all this stuff, you know, first came about, you know, you get sucked into it. You get sucked into your phone or your computer, because where else are you going to go? You're at home. It's late at night. You know, you're fretting. Maybe Scotty probably wasn't fretting. But like you go down these conspiracy theory, you know, rabbit holes or the political rabbit holes. And it's just, it like lives in the phone.
Yeah.
Like when you put the phone down, it's all gone. It's
Yeah.
like you're watching a movie and then you turn the movie off.
It really is about self-control once
Yeah.
you put it down. And you know what I think was interesting is for the first 2 weeks of the pandemic, maybe a little bit longer, the news was very apolitical. It was just like, hey, here's what's happening. Here's what's happened in Asia. Here's what's happening in Europe. Here's what's happening here. Here are the notifications. You know, very much like the news used to be, or how we perceive the news used to be.
Yeah.
When we were younger. It was like that for a while, and then all of a sudden it just got incredibly politically divisive. And I think, again, like during each one of those points, you have to evaluate how you're taking that media in. For me at the beginning, I was like, okay, this is interesting, but I'm not going to wallow in all the negativity. I was like, I have information so that I can keep me and my family safe, so that I can keep enough toilet paper in my arsenal, and those types of things. Then after that, it was like, okay, these people are being politically divisive. Let me see if I can grab some information, but stay away from this broadly because it's only going to make everyone crazy and fight with each other. And that's kind of the way I approach everything that I do, is to try and be thoughtful about what's about to happen if I get wrapped up in this, and try not to do that.
So do you think that this, your perspective or decision making obviously has evolved over time? Now, from what, I've read or understand about your background, you were, when you were deciding on going to college, you had two schools in mind.
Yeah.
And one was obviously West Point. And then what was the other school?
The other one was Cornell. I was recruited for lacrosse. And so I was really picking between those two schools. And I centered myself on Cornell, and I got into West Point. And then I got injured playing lacrosse in high school for the second time and got dropped from their early decision class. And then all of a sudden found myself going to West Point at a time that was very different, right? So officers were getting out of the military. There wasn't a war going on. And I was unprepared to go there. I don't find myself often as unprepared as I was to go to West Point, but I hadn't done my homework, and that is something actually I don't do a lot of, but I hadn't find myself that unprepared, and it was a culture shock. And then, junior year, 9/11 happened, and I realized I was going to go to war. But if I had to go back and redo all of that, I would have applied, gotten in, and gone.
Oh, really?
It wouldn't even have been a question, because I really do think that my military service changed the way I look at things. And it made me, I know this is going to sound, call it whatever you like, but it made me more, I look at the flag in a different way, and I think about this country. And there's been a lot of people during this time who are like, I don't want to be, America has changed. I'm going to move if Trump gets elected, or if Biden gets elected. I'm leaving this country. I can't take this anymore. And what they forget is that this country is great because all of these people are allowed to talk about their feelings and not be crushed down or be attacked because of their feelings. They're like, we're all allowed to express ourselves in different ways. And so I think people lose sight of that.
Yeah. I mean, the fact that we get to sit here, do this, you're asking me before, is it okay if I curse? I'm like, fuck yeah, it's okay if you curse, do whatever. Like the fact that we could do this little simple thing. Some countries you can't do this.
No.
And
the product that would be coming out of our mouths would be so edited.
Yeah.
Like, don't forget, this is what makes us great, is the fact that we can all do this.
Yeah, and people can disagree, and that's totally okay. It's funny to me too, because growing up, the first election presidential election I got to participate, like vote in. I think it was Al Gore, George W. Bush. And it's since then, it's the same, for lack of a better term, like same silliness that goes on as far as like what people are kind of spouting off about, or, who's voting for what and how it matters, and the divisiveness. It's definitely amplified because of social media.
Yeah.
But the thing that I thought was funny is like, the people seem to, maybe they weren't, maybe some people obviously weren't voting. Maybe some people that are angry now weren't even, born yet. But I just laugh because I'm like, it's the same. It's very similar in the arguments, the themes, all these things. It's kind of the same, thing that has happened,
throughout time.
Yeah. And the more, I was again, touching on this before, once I got wrapped up in all this, social media stuff, what you're seeing, conspiracies, politics, all these things that are going on, I was like, I need to take a break, and maybe it'll be helpful to learn about past civilizations, learn about a little history, motivational books, focus on that to give me a little more of a perspective than just getting wrapped up in this, for lack of a better term, nonsense that, if you're not taking care of your family, your business, and the things you're passionate about, then what are you actually like doing?
I think perspective is a huge thing. And I think people are spending so much time trying to erase history to some extent. There's a lot of cancel culture and whatnot. And some of those things are appropriate, but like what we need to realize is that our history is our history, and that is what it is.
Yeah.
And that we need to learn from it and gain perspective from what has previously happened. And that's why people's thought process has changed, and what has become socially acceptable has changed over time, is because people have changed their perspective and history has changed. And over time, those things change. And that's how I look at my own life, right? Like, I was, all those things you mentioned, I was in the war, I was divorced, I had cancer, and we're going through a pandemic, and there's been things throughout the time that have changed my perspective. And what I try to gain from that is not like, why me, right? So like from a cancer perspective, I had tongue cancer. I made an active decision as a high schooler not to smoke or dip or do anything, because I'd met someone with mouth cancer, and I was like, oh my God, I can't have this happen to me. And then it happened to me.
Yeah, were you thinking like, oh, I won't do this and then I'll be fine?
That's what you're taught, right? And like that's what health class teaches you. If you don't do these things, you shouldn't get this.
How did you find out that you got it?
I had like a canker sore on my tongue, and went and got it. And again, I'm a positive guy, so I went and got a doctor's, got it checked out, because my wife forced me to do it. Thank God for her. And then I hopped in the chair and was like, so all good on the biopsy? And he's like, no, you have cancer. And I was like,
man.
What? And again, I'm on a bus commuting. I have another hour and a half to get on my phone, research how bad it's going to be, all the things that happen before I tell my wife. And that is a struggle. I mean, that is like, it's bad news. And I could have said to myself, I did everything, like, why me? Why me? Why me? Instead, I just kind of took it as a point to say to myself, throughout your trials and tribulations, you've learned to maximize life and to be thoughtful about how you're living. Have you lost focus? And so I asked myself that again, and I was like, you know what? Here are the things I'm going to do as a byproduct of this to regain focus on life, whether it's walking more, spending more time sitting, thinking about things, talking to more people, picking up the things that I haven't done in the past, that I've always wanted to do. And that's kind of how I've generated that focus.
That's amazing. I mean, and going back to kind of, the idea of going into, would you say that, like, as far as going to West Point, you weren't really, if you weren't expecting to go there and you were just kind of going, like, applying as like a second thought, and now that you're happy you did and you wouldn't change that, do you feel like that taught you how to handle situations? And then going into the military kind of taught you how to handle situations?
I think it definitely helped. I mean, I definitely learned a lesson. Listen, I've always been fairly positive. I was a happy kid. I went through things as a kid too, but I was always, generally excited. Wake up, pop out of bed. I was always generally excited about those kind of things. I think West Point taught me that, that this sucks, right? Like, everybody's yelling at me. This is not a typical college experience. I was not prepared for this. I don't know where it's going to go. And I did a lot of complaining. I did. And my dad, made it pretty clear to me that you can either stop complaining and get on board, or quit.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to be stuck in this place that's making everyone around you miserable. And that, I'll never forget that conversation. I was like, I guess he's right.
Yeah.
What am I doing? I'm like stuck in this perpetual complaint. And if I don't get myself out of that, I'll be stuck there. I could be stuck there forever and not happy about every day. And something could happen to you on any given day. And this COVID will teach you that in a second. Like, if you haven't been to war, COVID will teach you it. Anything can happen in this world. And so, I think that helped me adapt a further thought process of like, I'm complaining about all this stuff. I better get on board.
It's going to happen whether you complain about it or not.
I either quit and go to another college and get the real college experience, or I finish this up and stay devoted to this and, be proud that I'm in the military. And that's what happened.
Well, I can tell you from experience that your college experience prepared you a lot for life. My college experience, taught me how to party. That's, anyway. That's
I got away on weekends, so I was able to come up the power curve.
That's good. Perfect. So, going kind of ahead, you faced cancer and you went through that whole process. And then, the kind of the impetus for the book was this whole COVID thing. Obviously it's in the title. When did it just come to you as kind of like you made yourself laugh? Like, did you come up with maybe one of the pages or an idea on a page and that kind of led to it?
No, it's actually funny how this all came about. I mean, the first thought that I had was, again, along the same positivity lines. I'm going to write a kid's book about a dad who spends more time with his kids. Mm-hmm. Because that's what I was doing. I was like, I know everybody's stuck in this mindset of this is terrible, and it is. But I'm spending more time with my kids. I just taught one of them to ride a bike. Now they're both swimming, all these things I was doing with them. And I was like, I'm going to write a book, a funny kid's book, either from the perspective of a child or an adult about spending that time, because all they know is dad's around more. Yeah. And they have to wear a mask. I mean, and school's weird. That's all they really knew at the time. And so I would talk to my wife throughout the first, 6 months of the pandemic. And I was like, hey, listen, I think I'm going to write a kid's book. And I would tell her lines. They would just pop in my head. And then what eventually happened, because I wrote a book much different than that, right? I wrote this profanity-filled book about an adult's experience for an adult. So it's an adult's kid's book, filled with profanity about my procession through the pandemic. But that I had a dream that I was writing a book, and I don't know if anybody's experienced this, but I've had the most ridiculously vivid dreams during COVID, and I've read that a lot of other people are because they're getting much more sleep, and I was not getting the amount of sleep that I'm getting now, and I won't disclose how many hours that is because I don't want my employer to know, but no, I mean, having those vivid dreams, I had this vivid dream that I wrote that kind kid's book, and then I wrote this screwed up adults book filled with profanity, and I was selling it as a box set, and it was selling like hotcakes. And while I was in my dream, I was writing this messed up adults book in my head, and I woke up and it was still kind of going in my head. And I woke up very early. My wife was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "I have an idea." And I went downstairs and started writing it all down as quickly as I could. And she came downstairs and she was like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "I'm writing a book. I wrote a book in my dream. I'm writing a book." And she's like, "Oh, you're writing a book." And I was like, I swear to God, I'm writing a book. And she's like, "You're not a person who writes a book." And I would tell you, less than a week later, I had a book.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So what was, you have it kind of all, the main idea written out. Mm-hmm. What, for people that want to say, write a book and being on the outside of it and not, I know people that, went to school, writing, English majors, all that stuff, want to write a book for their whole life, and then write a book, don't write a book. But, what could you say as far as how you the idea's there, you physically manifested it, so you wrote it all out, but then there's this whole other journey of okay, now I got to get it into print and get it out there. What would you say to people that kind of want to do something similar? They want to put a book out there. What were some of the main takeaways that you got from that?
Well, that's an interesting point. What I would say is have a family member in the book industry who can tell you all about it. Because I have a cousin who works at a big book company, and so I used him to gather some of that information. But it's easier than you would think. I mean, I was really blown away how quickly. I mean, look, I guess I'm old and don't realize how social media is instantaneously out there, but you could throw a book together and get it in print fairly quickly through Amazon and different outlets. Now, all of those outlets come with their costs and benefits, whether you use a publisher, whether you use Amazon, right? Certain stores don't buy from Amazon, you get more benefits from a publisher, but you make less money and all those things. But you can find online how to do anything. And one of them is get a book into print on Amazon, and it is effectively, can be done in less than a week once you have your product. Yeah. So what I would say is, don't hide under the veil of I can't get to it, or, I don't think I'm smart enough. Again, I want to make something perfectly clear. I am the worst writer that I know. I just had a great editor, my wife, and a fairly good idea. But if you want to do something, you can do it. And now a lot of us have more time not commuting and take the time and do something you haven't done before.
Yeah, I was incredibly, I was delirious from lack of sleep when all this happened, having a newborn. And then you kind of, get into this, for me, it was this pretty kind of not great routine in the beginning. The cool thing was the podcast kept going, and it kind of, as cheesy as it sounds, it was nice to connect with people
and have an outlet.
Yeah, have an outlet, and then let them know that like you're there. There's some people I had on there that told me that there was like, it was like pretty dark times, like when we would be, we would do a podcast together, and like, recently have told me that they were incredibly, not happy. They were depressed and they didn't know what the hell was going on. And if the podcast helped them or not, I have no idea. But it was nice to have a kind of a connection. And some of the things that it allowed me to do too was kind of put a perspective on what I was spending my time on and what I wanted to spend my time on. Because it was fun to do a late night Zoom call, do a podcast. I'm not a huge drinker. And I had all of this alcohol in my house from parties past and whatever. And like, I found myself
stop by.
Well, I mean, I just, wouldn't touch it really.
I can help.
And then, then I found myself, I'm like doing the podcast, I'm drinking, it's all great. And I'm just like, what am I doing? I gotta tighten it up a little bit more. And I think that, there's this toll that people went through. I'm so blessed and fortunate to like have a family, have a wife, have my, wonderfully healthy little boy, have, a network of friends or family that I could reach out to. And some people didn't, didn't have that. And it goes beyond, actually, having COVID. Like there's people out there that had like, mental, anguish, physical problems, and they didn't have people to reach out to. And it took me thinking about that kind of perspective of it to be like, you got to straighten out and take this time. And I think it kind of lends itself to what you were saying before, is it's not a good situation, but you kind of have to find the positive in the situation to what you can kind of gather from it.
Again, totally agree. This is shitty.
Yeah.
It has been a shitty year, but we can sit there and talk about how bad it's been, or we can make some progress. Yeah. And, not everything I've done has been forward progress in my life, but I try to focus on how to make progress and the things that are important, like, excuse me, communicating with other people during this time. I never FaceTimed before. Now I do it all the time, and I've created stronger relationships because of that, and that's fantastic. And I'm talking like you to people I've never spoken to before.
Yeah.
And the insights you can gather from those individuals, can only benefit you, right? Because no matter what your political opinion was, or how you feel about the current state of America, we all went through this together, and you might as well take something out of it instead of just wallowing in sadness or focusing on all the nonsense.
Well, and how long can someone wallow for? If it takes
you
a lot,
you can wallow for a long. I've learned that you can wallow for a long time.
If you can wallow for that long, there's got to be something, and to put a spin on it, like a positive spin, like if you can wallow that long, there's got to be something else instead of wallowing. You need a wallow converter into putting that energy into doing something else aside from wallowing. Like that takes a lot of time and effort and energy to wallow. Like, it's hard.
Think about if you were cleaning the garage with that type of energy.
Oh yeah. Like, oh man, I cleaned out a lot of stuff. We would tackle these projects at the house that it was just like, man, why didn't we do this sooner? And it's
incredible. It's incredible what people, I think people had mixed experiences, but I know a lot of people, whether they took this whole thing as positive or negative or partially positive and negative, but a lot of people got things done they never thought they'd get done.
Exactly.
And my real concern is that people don't walk away from this without remembering this. And that's been my experience in every one of these life events I've been through. It's like, don't forget what just happened. Don't forget the lessons you were taught, right? Like, you're in the war. Don't forget how precious this is. Don't forget how free this country is. Don't forget how everything can change in a dime. How precious your life is. It can end like that. And COVID has taught everybody that again, but I hope people are watching, because that's not that's not a bad message. It's an important message if you turn it correctly.
Yeah, and I mean that's the thing too. I'm just some asshole with a podcast. Like, people want to look to you and be like, oh, well, what do you know about it? It's like, I was in the military. I was in Baghdad. I was in Iraq. Like, you're cancer survivor. And those things are very heavy, but I mean, that's not to say that divorce, being a child of divorce, I know that like that's a tough toll. That's stressful. So you've had all these experiences, and for you to have all of these experiences and to come out with this positive attitude that, this energy that you got around you, like, I don't think people can really basically talk too much shit to you about.
But even so, and I totally relevant point, right? Like, I do think I have a lot of life experiences, but the next person has more than me. And I think people forget that there's always someone with a different story, a more challenging story, more legitimacy. There's always someone around the corner from you that has that. And I'm not going to diminish those people at all. I think the world becomes a better place if we're sharing that, and each one of us is sharing it. Because if we're not talking about it, we're not benefiting from what we've learned from each other. And so maybe I'm a little bit further on the side of the bell curve with more life experiences at my age, but I know there's people with more of it and more challenging situations. I hope they tell their story too, because I want to hear it.
Yeah.
Because that's how I feel like we all benefit each other.
Yeah, exactly. And to the point you made before, as far as like, complaining, being in a situation where you're just like complaining, everyone around you, is affected by that.
Yeah.
And then kind of making that conscious effort to be like, all right, well, I'm in it. Like, we're all in our own situations. And, my point was not to diminish anybody else's situation. It's just that, if you're sitting there and all you're doing is complaining and you're not taking action, there are other people that have taken that energy, that same energy you're using to wallow and complain, and they've converted it into something else. And to maybe, just maybe, the things that have kind of gotten me through, my own personal dilemmas, I always say, like, what if something happens that's positive out of this? Like, why don't I just try to do this until the wheels fall off? Why don't I just try to do this and I keep pushing myself forward until there is an actual, like, Great Wall of China obstacle in front of me where I can't do it? And from having that perspective on it, it's challenged me to just keep pushing, even if it's like you stubbed your toe and you got to keep moving. You got to keep going forward.
You never know what's going to happen. And, if I hadn't had that outlook too, like, I effectively wrote a book and published it in a couple of weeks, right? And the reason I did it is because I didn't want to stop. I wanted to see how it ended. And I wanted to see what this creative outlet could create for me. And that's how a lot of my life has gone. I've been in situations where I'm like, if I don't push, I don't know what the outcome is. I'd like to have a little bit more control on it, over it, and understand it a little bit better and get a positive takeaway. I mean, look, there have been lots of things to complain about. I mean, this year, going through divorce was very, very difficult, and especially with a young child at the time. I mean, those things can change the way you look at things forever, and it can be negative. You can find yourself in a depressed state. You can find yourself questioning who you are. Why not come out of it really knowing those answers and doing some introspection? I spend a lot of time thinking about how I interact with other people and thinking about who I am as a person. And I do it when I'm walking, whatever. And I think it's important that people are thoughtful about that, because who are we if we don't have everybody else to interact with?
Yeah, exactly. I feel like you have at least a couple more books in you. I feel like this is like the first
just the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah. And I mean, have you ever, because I'm motivated now, I'm ready to go out there and take on the world. Like, do you have any aspirations or inspirations or ideas as far as like going to talk to people or going to to motivate other people?
Yeah, I mean, I've had discussions with, I've been in situations where I do a lot of public speaking, and I do enjoy it because I do think, even as a kid, I thought it was interesting that people had such different stories. I think about some of the people I've met in my life, people who have had traumatic war experiences, people who are CEOs of companies, and everybody's story is different. Now you have, 20-year-old multimillionaires off cryptocurrencies. Like, everybody has an interesting story that they could share. I've thought about sharing my story because I think I want to hear theirs. And so I feel like if I volunteer myself a little bit more and put myself a little bit more out there, that people, I hope just if 2 more people talk a little bit more, maybe the world becomes a better place, because what's happening is people are talking, people are responding, and then they're shutting people out.
Yeah.
Instead, let's continue that conversation, because the dialogue will end somewhere better if you actually put some thought into the conversation.
Yeah, I always thought that it would be a very interesting experiment. Instead of people being able to type out a minimal character, response, a comment on a thing, if you actually had to make a video of yourself explaining your thoughts on it, or taking it a step further where you actually had to get on a FaceTime and like the person that posted that, you had to have a back and forth conversation, how different that would be. Because you read an email, you read a comment, you can interpret that in a billion different ways.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, and I've definitely even recently been guilty myself of being like, well, what does that mean? Like, why did he underline that word, or what is that? And taking things so out of context, where if you take a beat and you realize that, like, that person that you feel this vitriol towards, that, they got a family, they've got a perspective, they're hurting in some way. And kind of, to your point, if people could kind of communicate more openly or hear their story and then make up your, mind on how you want to handle this, it could lead to a better outcome.
Listen, phones are amazing, right? You can buy stuff on Amazon, book a rental car and a vacation, and, watch 3 shows before you get to where you need to go. But you can also, when you read something written that's written quickly, that can be exchanged instantaneously, the interpretation for that is wildly different than how it was meant. An emoji can send somebody on a total manic state, right? So you have to be thoughtful about what you're doing. And I think now more than ever, because people can do those things so quickly, people are responding faster than they used to, and they're not putting thought into it and being careful about what they say next, and that's ruining people's careers.
Yeah.
And it's blowing apart friendships and families.
Yes.
You got to be careful, and you got to be thoughtful about what you're doing, because people are interpreting them the way they want to. Mm-hmm. And that's a great point. Like, maybe we should be doing this face to face.
Yeah. I think you kind of come to maybe a better or a broader, a better perspective on what that person's going through. I did that recently, and I swear I really try not to like comment on stuff, but every now and then if it's late, or if I had a beer and I see somebody comment something, I'm like, yeah, whatever, blah, 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 comment back. I've made it a habit now to go back, either like close out the conversation in a positive way, or just completely delete the comment and be like, that was stupid, don't do that. And I recently got into this back and forth with somebody on Twitter, back and forth. And I realized the person I was talking to was like a kid. It was like a 14-year-old kid. And I'm like, I'm this, you asshole. Like, what am I arguing with this person for? I think I'm talking to an adult. I'm not. And then when I realized, oh, it's a kid, I'm like, oh my God, like, this is like the height of egg on my face, like, to myself. No one, if I didn't mention it now, nobody'd really know about it, but I don't give a shit. Like, I'm sitting there arguing with this person. I think I'm having, like, in my head, you visualize an adult, your same age, back and forth, having a conversation. Yeah. And then you realize, oh, my dad bought me this computer. And I'm like, wait a second, what the, oh my God, like, it's so stupid.
It's the veil of social media. It's the veil of writing things instantaneously.
Yeah.
And you have to be thoughtful about how you're engaging with people. Are sensitive today, and more than ever, people are expressing those sensitivities. Mm-hmm. And so you have to be more thoughtful about everything you say. That's good and bad, right?
Yeah.
Like, I'd like to see personally, a little bit tougher skin, thicker skin as it relates to some of these conversations, but it's people's right to interpret things however they want.
Yeah.
And if you want to be sensitive to people, you have to be thoughtful about that. And people just aren't thinking about it. Yeah. And again, like, we would benefit so much from knowing what that other person is thinking, but nobody sits there and asks. And not a lot of people are talking about it. Mm-hmm. And, I think people during this pandemic were like, this is a disaster. What's happening? Everything's slipping out of our hands. I have to buy all these supplies. I have to protect this. We're going to run out of food, all these things. I'm like, let's take a step here. Like most people's pantries you could live out of for like, on a deserted island, you'd be good for like a year and a half.
Yeah.
So I think just stopping and like being a little bit more thoughtful than a quick reaction, I think is more important than it ever has been.
Is that kind of, as far as your book, is that kind of what you want people to get out of it in regards to just being like, we were all in this, whether you realized it before or realize it now, like we're all kind of in this, and you were trying to bring some kind of like levity to the situation?
I think that's part of it. I think I was trying to say, hey, look, this is terrible, recognized, and make some laughs about how terrible it was, but also to pull people together and remember, like, it's terrible, but like a lot of things that happen to us that are terrible, we can laugh about in the end, or, we can look and make them funny to ourselves, or, like the too soon jokes, right? Like, is it too soon to say this? Like, I wrote a book in the middle of this, and you can interpret it, but I'm not gonna deny that all these terrible things were happening. So I wanted to say, hey, everybody who thinks something terrible is happening, why don't you read this, have a laugh? Maybe it's like the yearbook from COVID, and that's how you look at it, is like, this is the thing this is the only positive thing I'll remember about this. But also to try and give people a spin on it, right? Like, don't take it like this is a serious thing, but you don't have to take all of life so seriously. Like, just relax, think about the funny things that are happening, laugh about them, don't get caught in the minutia. I think that was really one of my main goals from it. Another one was just an outlet for me to talk about things. But my hope is that it brings people together, makes them laugh. And again, we went through all of this together. I think some of us remember, things like some good news and some of the positive things, some of the on-demand concerts that were happening. So like, don't forget, like, we can laugh about this. There were some good things. You spent more time with your kids. I mean, it's a challenge.
Yeah.
But I enjoyed it. And were there some times where I lost my mind? Of course. And the book talks about those times.
Yeah. You really you have to make you have to kind of come back to a routine. You get to this point where everything's shut down and you don't have to go anywhere, and you lose track of a routine. And then you have to kind of figure it out for yourself. Like, what's something that could work for me so that I can kind of keep it.
That's exactly right.
What's the best way, if people just go on Amazon, what's the best way to get a copy of the book?
Yeah, best way is to go on Amazon, put Scotty Alpaw into the search bar, or Have No Fear, There's Always Fucking Next Year. Those are the best ways to get a hold of it. I've done a couple other podcasts which have some similar messages in them. But that's really the best way to get the book. And I think people will enjoy it. It's the artistry is my family. And so I know, if nothing else I've accomplished, my daughter in a conversation with a couple of her friends was like, yeah, well, my dad wrote a book last week. And I was like, yeah, I did. She goes, and look, my picture's in it. I was like, yes. So, doing things like that for your kids, like, that is something I'll never, like, it seems like a small thing, right? Even if one person bought it, like, my kids are in a book that somebody bought and someone thinks is funny, even though there are some reviews that do not think it's funny. I think it's funny, and a lot of people do.
Well, you can't have all positive reviews, and that just shows, that just shows the realness of the book too. If you're, one of my favorite comedians is Bill Burr, and I went to go see him, and he made some joke, and the people like got real mad, took it out of context, and like flipped out and like left. And, he's selling out like, giant like venues. So you're not going to please everybody 100% of the time, Well, Scotty, what's the best way for people to get in touch with you?
So Instagram, Happily Ever Alpaw.
That's LPAW because you're
on Instagram.
Yeah. Cause it's Happily Ever LPAW because your last name is Alpaw.
Spelled differently.
Yeah.
I simplified it for this. That's the phonetic spelling on it.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for sitting down. I'd love to have you back on. It seems like you got more insight into life to lend to other people. And I just want to say thanks a lot for coming on.
Thanks for having me. This was great. I really appreciate it.
All right, cool, man. Well, that's another episode of Toy Local Podcast. Jersey Shore's most beautiful, wonderful podcast. If you didn't know, Monmouth County, Ocean County. We cover it all. Local businesses, colorful characters, and entrepreneurs. Go enjoy your life, people. Go have a lot of fun out there, and that's all I got. See you guys later.